The Covenant is the most important ship of 2024, and today I'm going to go over the build. Hey everyone, Derpy here, and welcome back to another Battle Pirates video. This is my detailed build, which is the Covenant Guide number 3. The first one was on VXP. If your ships are ranked up, you can probably skip that one. The second one is really important, shows you what countermeasures work, which ones don't, as well as shows you the different turrets. I got a ton of great feedback from people who've watched that. If you haven't, go ahead and watch that already before you watch this one. The next two videos after this one are going to be on some driving tips, as well as the planned build and my planned upgrade, refit schedule, etc. for this ship. As I get started, I do want to tell you that I have my build stock available at a link in the YouTube description, 100% free for you guys to access, but if you guys do like my videos generally, and specifically the build stock, you can get your name added here by helping become a channel member. Click join below the YouTube video and you'll get your name added to here. Now the other thing is that to paste in the builds, all you have to do is copy the hash code, go to your shipyard and press share, paste it in and press load. Now, before we jump into the build, I do want to talk about the ship generally. Keep in mind these base stats are going to vary just a little bit. If you have your Conquest Yard, or I believe your Retrofit Lab or Tactical Lab at a lower level, that changes the evade and the building damage right here. Don't worry too much about that. By the way, we are going to have a new outpost really soon, which means new lab levels. This is still a tier 12.5 ship, so it still benefits from everything older than this one, which is pretty nice. Now, there's nothing too exciting for the stats other than, say, the built-in weapon, which is the best tower missile, and this one does look pretty powerful. It is not affected by reload, but should still be affected by things like range, damage, and splash. Keep splash in mind because we're going to come back towards that at the very end. Now, the first thing you should do when you're building your ships is determine what your countermeasure setup is going to be. I am a fan of a single countermeasure ship, but there are a few other options, which I'll discuss after I show you the build for that one. Oh, and by the way, I got some feedback that people do like seeing some different options for a special, so I'm going to do my best to give you multiple options on something, show you the best and the second best version of something if you don't have that one. Particularly with newer players, it's okay, perfectly fine to use a replacement special if you can't get 5 million points to get the newest one. Now, in terms of the weapons on your countermeasure ship, you're going to want to use a single MDS-3. You only want to use that one MDS-3 because anti-missiles shoot at every incoming missile exactly one time. Even if you miss, you are going to not shoot at it again, unlike Gale's there, which works completely differently. Now, notice the reload time here is 5 seconds. That gets cut to about 1 second when you have the 75% legendary rank, as well as the anti-missile reload you're going to put on through one of the specials. This means you can deal with approximately 1 incoming missile every 1/10 of a second, so 10 missiles in 1 second, and in these targets you're never going to have more than that. So if you see someone putting 4 or 5 Missile Defense System 3s on their entire fleet, those are pretty much wasted slots and wasted specials that could go to something else. There is an argument for 2, but it does make your Gales much weaker, which of course I'll have to talk about when I finish talking about those. So now that we have that one on the fleet that deals with pretty much all the incoming missiles, and you're not going to countermeasure 100% of them, but 50% should cut your damage in half, which is pretty good. Now the other 5 slots, which are countermeasure equipable, notice these 2 at the bottom are just standard. These other 5 slots are going to be Gale 4s. Now Gales do have the benefit of if you miss the first time, you can fire at it a second or even a third time. Of course, your projectile speed has to be high enough and actually able to intercept that enough times, which is why this hull is going to be a really high projectile speed build. And the last 2 weapons here are just going to be missiles. It is the same missile that are going to be on the rest of them. They're not really going to do any damage. This is the Keeper missile. Unfortunately, there's no other good alternative if you didn't get this one in the raid because it's tier 12.5. Everything else is a really low tier. You're better off just maybe using Triari on the older targets until you can get this one. I do hope that it is going to be out in pillage for a pretty cheap price. And I'll talk more about those missiles as we look at the damaged ship. Now the first special you want to use here, switching into specials on the countermeasure ship, is going to be an engine. I'm going to use the Orcus engine. This is a tier 12.5 engine and gives you 40k survival. If you take a look, the tier 11 one gives you, 23k, and the tier 10 one gives you 10k. You can use older engines pretty well. Even the Sarkina engine is the second best one. That's 35k survival. 35k versus, let's see right here, 40k, very, very tiny difference. So if you don't have the Orcus, just use the Sarkina or whatever Garrison engine, really. That survival amount is going to be really, really low. That's the first one right there. The second one is going to be a range boosting special, which you do have a few options for. On the countermeasure hull specifically, there are a few different options you're going to want to use, and the one I like the best is actually one that helps boost the projectile speed as well, because I did tell you that was pretty important, and that is the advanced optical tracking. This has the penetrative range of 30%, which is what you need, and this is tier 6, so you probably all have that. If you don't, whatever other penetrative special should be fine on this one. Something even like a guided missile system would do great. But you have this one on here, and the extra projectile speed of 25% is really nice there, just to give you an extra bonus on this one. I'm not worried about damage or reload of any of these missiles and stuff like that. Another good projectile speed special is going to be high velocity rounds, and this is a classic one. It's a tier 6. You likely all have this one, and that one again is really, really nice. You could use something like the high speed missile jets for less projectile speed, more damage, but this is not a damaged ship. These two missiles are going to do about 0 damage compared to everything else in the target. We also definitely want a countermeasure special. If you look at your limited, you have the Mirror Maze defense system. It has an armor weight of 25%, and the anti-missile and anti-missile reload, anti-mortar reload, etc. are the exact same as the Paterios defense system here, and you do have some explosive reload, penetrative reload, concussive reload, but penetrative reload of 40% here, not super important on the ship that is just a countermeasure ship. The anti-missile and anti-mortar stats are going to be the exact same as the Paterios defense system, if I'm pronouncing that correctly here, but the weight is lower on this one, so I'm going to recommend you put the Paterios on here if you don't already have things fitted, again, because it does have it just has less costs in terms of the total weight. Obviously, you're not worried about the weight in any case, and the extra reload from explosive doesn't do anything. We already have penetrative reload 1 on here. I think my actual ship I do have built has Mirror Maze, but it really does not matter between these two specials at all, so pick whichever countermeasure special you like. I did think about maybe should we put on something like the chaff splitter system to have higher anti-missile accuracy or something like that. I did not actually think that it was going to be worth it, and again, that the anti-missile accuracy is 40% here, 50% here. If you are building an MBS3 only ship, maybe you shift to using the chaff splitter system on that one, but otherwise you're just going to lose too much damage from that one. It is a decent option, but not one I like, because I plan to have my other 3 ships be damage only. Last 2 special slots we're going to continue to use to boost stuff like projectile speed. You're not going to use the battery because that doesn't help projectile speed. It just helps with something like the damage. Again, not really worried about that on this ship. Explosive System 4 is the next highest one, which will give you an extra 40% projectile speed, which is pretty nice, and the extra splash might be kind of helpful for the built-in weapon, but we'll get back to that one more on a damaged ship. This built-in weapon is going to do pretty low damage in any case. The very, very last special is, again, just another projectile speed special, and that is going to be one of the last ones you can actually put on, which is the subaquatic propellant. The countermeasure reload here is not helpful at all, but the projectile speed is why this is on here. So what you see right here is a ship with a massive amount of projectile speed and very, very low damage. That's the option I've chosen to go for. A few of you do prefer to put on a little bit of a different build, and I'll talk about that one a little bit towards the end. Now, I am only using 5 gales, and I've done some testing as well as some other people in the community have done some testing. If you are using 5 gales, you need to have a pretty high projectile speed. Not quite as high as I need to. This is a little overkill for the current targets, but I do expect them to get a little bit harder. If you're using 5 gales, you need to boost it more than just the generic missile special that adds a little bit of projectile speed, which is maybe down in the limited section here. I can't actually put it on because I already have things maxed out. You need to do more projectile speed than just the basic amount you're going to get if you are using only 5 gales. If you're using 6, you have a little bit more wiggle room with not needing to put on as crazy projectile speed specials, but I don't really think that that's worth it. You're probably going to get damaged a little tiny amount if you're sitting very, very close to mortars with this build, but try not doing that and see if you're able to avoid some of that damage. In terms of the total armors, there are going to be a few different options. You can use just the missile armor and explosive armor that came out with the ship. I'm recommending 3 and 3 because that's the current maximum that we can equip and equip to all of our 4 ships. If you have built 5 ships, maybe you're going to drop the missile because I think explosive is the more guaranteed damage type. I could be wrong on that one. It could be flipped. I think missile actually is the more guaranteed damage type. Take whichever one you're getting less damage of and put on an older plate that's going to fit. This is 72k survival. You can easily put on an older one here that has 60k, which is the GMGX, instead of here the biogenic is the ones I'm using. You can just drop to an older one that has the same damage type and same survival type. Even the Lorkina here, if you want to not get the penetrative damage buff right there. So there is my countermeasure ship, and I will put the hash code for this one in the YouTube description. What I'm going to do now is actually clear the ship entirely before we start building our damage ships, and again, I'll talk about these sort of hybrid options at the very end here. Now, I'll put on the armors first because those are exactly the same. I'm going to use three of each. If you think we can lean towards more of a specific damage type, sure, throw on more of that one, but the next target that comes out probably does more damage. And as I already have countermeasures completely covered, I'm going to put on the Keeper Missile across all of these. Unfortunately, there is really not a very good second option at all. I did look pretty hard and didn't find anything that came close to doing the same amount of damage. The engine, of course, is going to be the same. Your primary option is the Orcus engine, which with the secondary option being something like the Sarkina option. The third choice one would actually be really just any garrison engine that you can match combat speed and have 5 of if you do want that one. The second special is going to be a range boosting special. Now the very, very best one for this is the Star Tracker Guidance System. This has penetrative range, reload damage, and retargetable, which is nice. Unfortunately, this is limited, and as you can see, I am actually out of them. If you don't have this one, fear not, because you can get 1 per week in prize pool 2 of the Forsaken mission for really, really cheap. Or you can maybe refit it off of your Sovereigns, which I would not do, or refit it off your Arcs, which I would strongly consider, and I actually did myself. If you don't want to do that or want to replace it on either ship, the second best option is going to be the Laser Scope right here, which has the 30% penetrative range. Reload and damage are 50% and 25% compared to something right here, which is 55 and 35. So the Laser Scope is the second best option and will be just a little bit worse than the Star Tracker. Probably worth doing because we can refit things really, really easily and have a whole bunch of options when it comes time to do that. You can also really look past that at any special which has penetrative range of 30%. We have some regular blueprint ones that are floating around too that you could probably find without too much hassle, even dropping down to something as low as advanced optical tracking or guided missile system. You're going to have one of those two things out there for sure. But the best option out there is definitely the Star Tracker Guidance System. A few different damage specials now. The first one is going to be the Wreath Targeting Console, which is a tier 12.5, so kind of old one here. And this is going to give you accuracy, projectile speed, reload, and damage. Is overall pretty nice. You could use something else instead of that one. I think we had a regular one right here. Obsession Missile Systems might be okay to use on that one, and we can actually even stack them up in some cases, I believe, what you'll see. Retargeting Console, pretty good overall damage special, penetrative damage plus 115%. You can use something else as well, like the Hydrophobic Warheads is decent and does pretty close to that one. It might not be the exact second best option, but is pretty good. Even one of these older ones right here that has penetrative damage, Lethal Strike Warheads, would get you done in a pinch if you are a new or returning player. So Retargeting Console is that one. Special slot number 4 is going to be another one of my specials that came out with the ship, which is the Anima Battery. This gives you 110% built-in damage, 45% penetrative damage, which is really, really nice. If you don't have that, you could use something. Don't use the UAV battery right here because it gives you... Actually, this might be the second best option, even dropping down to Garrison Battery MK2. That's actually just worse than UAV battery, so you can use UAV battery as your second best option, even though it's allegedly for UAVs. The penetrative damage and building damage result still applies. That's the option number 2. Option number 3 is Garrison Battery MK2M, to avoid the X1 right here because that doesn't have penetrative. The best one, of course, is still the one that came out, which is the Anima Battery. We're going to continue with our sort of damage special options here with the Obsession Missile Systems. I did say it could stack earlier. It looks like I'm right on that one. The projectile speed is nice, penetrative damage is nice, building damage is nice, and wall damage is nice. Now you do have, in my mind, a little bit of a better option, and that is actually under limited if you go all the way down to one that came out for the Triari escalation for liquid fire warheads. This gives you plus 220% building damage, which is much more than the building damage from Obsession Missile System. This will mean you do much better against buildings, but generally worse against things like ships. Luckily, in this target, it appears that ships are not the primary threat, and all of them can be killed for 0 damage, where turrets are the thing that you need to kill really, really quickly. So liquid fire warheads is the way to go on that one. Obviously, if you could put on the Obsession Missile Systems as well, that would be the choice, but you can't, so unfortunately, you have to choose one of those. If you want a generally better ship that does okay against buildings and okay against ships, put on the Obsession Missile Sensors. If you want one that is fantastic against ships, then put on the liquid fire warheads. And again, that one is limited, so if you don't have it, probably just go back over and use the Obsession Missile System. K2 would be another option as well. You get about 200% damage instead of just the 220, so that is something else you could use if you are, again, wanting to do more damage against buildings right there. Now, just looking through our stats and our final specials, we do have a few other general choices, and the first option I thought about was maybe we just put more penetrative reload on there. Something like Batarios, obviously you don't have any countermeasures, so that's not very useful. Maybe we could do that. Maybe we could we'd have to change our countermeasure build to do something. We could put on Hyper 30 and have the extra combat speed, which is helpful at avoiding damage from the rockets, and add maybe a little bit of evade that would help against the missiles. I thought about both of those things. Something like Agility System 4 you have to be really careful about because the stun and slow resistances will not help in PvE targets as they're currently designed. You need something like the Tactical Field Resistance, not stun or slow resistance. It's a little confusing, but there is a special that does something like that. I don't think I'm going to use that, and instead I'm going to go through something I actually saw Billy do, which was pretty interesting and was pretty useful, and that was using something to boost the splash. Now, you're doing this because the built-in weapon is really important and essentially lets you outrange things that you're not going to outrange anyway. And what I mean by that is if you are using the built-in weapon to hit something close and those three weapons go on a line there, they hit something further away, and in order to do that, you can actually increase the damage they do with splash. So Combustion System II is really nice for that because of the plus 74% splash. The spread I don't believe does anything because it's already a direct, exact area of effect damage and is not dumbfire like your traditional mortar might be. There are a few other options out there. They don't really have high enough splash to make them worth it, and the extra projectile speed is a little tiny bit of a bonus. You might kill something just a half a second earlier, which means it might not shoot the second option off at you. So, as unconventional as it sounds, I'm going to use Combustion System II on a missile ship right there. This, combined with the countermeasure build, should be really, really powerful. I'm actually not building a flagship yet, I'm only building 4 ships in the fleet. More on that will be discussed in one of the future videos as to why. If you are building 5 ships, no worries, do 1 countermeasure and 4 damage. The one, at this point, I'll shift into talking about modifications and saying that a modification you could make is taking Combustion System II right here and changing this to be the Batarios defense system and putting a single MDS-3, or maybe you want 2 MDS-3s on the fleet. You could put 2 MDS-3s right here, put Batarios defense system, or even if you really wanted the one that was best for anti-missiles, you could go for the Chaff splitter system that has slightly higher anti-missile accuracy, so you could put that one on here, and this could be your MDS-3 ship if you felt so inclined and really felt like you needed 2 of these and to have 6 kills on your anti-ship. But of course, I don't really recommend that one because I don't think it's quite as useful. So I'll go back to my primary build here. Let me quickly go over the alternate specials again, just in case you did or you are sort of a returning player and were a little bit confused by some of this. So the Orcus engine, Garrison, is you want to use this one. If you don't have it, the Sarkina engine, which is limited, is a pretty good option right here. As you can see, I'm out of those. If you're out of that one too, you could pick the Aeon engine or really any Garrison engine that you have 5 of and is the same combat speed as everything in your fleet. That's the option on that one. Looking at the Star Tracker guidance system, this is your penetrative range special. If you don't have this one, you could use something else. Laser scope is the second best. You probably have that one, because that came out with Photon ECMs in tier 9.5. If you don't even have that one, you can go back down to your regular blueprint specials and use something even as low as the advanced optical tracking for the penetrative range of 30%. In terms of retargeting console, this is your limited damage special. If you don't have this one, you can use something like hydrophobic warheads, or even something like the surgical strike, lethal strike, even down to just your regular carbon fiber casing, and even the wave pulse warhead would all be things that are doing penetrative damage, so those are a few specials you could consider instead. Liquid fire warheads is obviously a pretty building damage focused special. If you don't have that one, you can use the K2 bombardment that came out with Everest, which is slightly worse, or if you haven't put on things that lock it out, Obsession missile systems is a decent option. K2 bombardment should be pretty readily available. If for whatever reason you don't, you can use something a little bit older that does building damage right here, such as maybe the high yield warheads. In fact, I'm kind of even thinking maybe I should use this to make the built-in weapon even stronger, but probably not going to do that. Anima battery is the best penetrative battery out there currently. You can consider things like UAV battery MK2, Garrison battery MK2M, and even some limited stuff should be floating around at some point. Looks like it's all pretty much locked out because of your other specials. But there are two things there that you could consider using instead. And of course, the Combustion System II, put on any splash special, you likely have this one already for free, but Combustion System I, Explosive System 4, any of that stuff should do decent. So now that I've gone over sort of the extra specials that you might consider using as a returning player, which again I would definitely try and get the best stuff you can for as few points as possible. If you can't get the expensive stuff, it's fine to use older stuff completely until you can build this fleet up and start using it. So that's the final build. I showed you the countermeasure one earlier on, 1 countermeasure ship for me, and then 3 or 4 damage ships. If you build 4 ships, I'm not going to complain here. And this build might change and evolve a little bit over time as we do see some upgrades come out here, or an escalation special, or any other tweaks to the targets, etc. So do keep an eye on the channel, and I'll make updates for those ones. At this point, I want to give a huge thank you to those whose names appear on the end screen now. They're helping keep the channel possible, the build stock possible. And if you want your name here, click the join button below the YouTube description. Thank you to all the channel members. With that said, and until next time, this is going to be Derpy signing out, helping you be a better pirate.